news on the broadcast. We're learning that Indian cricketer Shreyas Iyer is in the intensive care unit of a Sydney hospital after suffering a horrific injury during a recent third ODI against Australia. Iyer ended up hurting his rib cage while successfully completing a difficult catch at the backward point to remove Alex Carey. The India ODI vice captain was in extreme pain immediately after the attempt and was tended to by the team physio on the field before, in fact, trudging off the field on Saturday. These are concerning inputs that we are getting as Shreyas Iyer is in the ICU of a Sydney hospital post that incident. My colleague Vineet Ramakrishna is joining us on the broadcast. Vineet, how is Shreyas Iyer doing after that entire attempt of, in fact, that fielding attempt that everyone saw and the physio was attending to him? Nobody really saw this coming, that he would be admitted to the ICU of this hospital.
Well, initially when the incident happened, when he took the diving catch running backwards, he was in a lot of pain and it felt, you could see that he was in discomfort. But yeah, as you mentioned, nobody really thought that the extent of the injury would be this much, that he would have to be in the ICU. And what we are hearing is that he's been in the ICU for the last 2 days. After the incident, we could see the visuals of him walking in discomfort, held by the assistants, Team India assistants. But once he reached the dressing room, the reports, what we're hearing is that his blood pressure became alarmingly low and the decision was taken him to move to the Sydney hospital. And once at the hospital, an internal bleeding was detected, and hence he was moved to the ICU, and he has been in the ICU for the past 2 days. And what we are hearing is that he might be there under observation for the coming week in itself, meaning his flight back to India would be delayed. This also means that his participation in India's next international assignment, that is the South Africa ODI starting late November, may also looks unlikely here. The initial prognosis was that he might be out for 3 to 4 weeks, but with this internal bleed being detected, that recovery timeline seems to stretch now.
Right. Also, Vineet, we are getting a statement from the BCCI. I'm just quoting from that statement. They are mentioning that scans have revealed a laceration injury of the spleen. He is under treatment, they say, medically stable, recovering well, and that is a reassuring statement that's coming in from the BCCI. The BCCI medical team is in consultation with the specialists in Sydney and India, and they are closely monitoring Iyer's injury status. The Indian team doctor will remain in Sydney with Shreyas to evaluate his day-to-day progress. Some reassurance there, Vineet, although they do talk about this internal bleeding that you were mentioning and how his ribcage has undergone a big impact because of that blow, but they are talking about how he's recovering well to treatment.
Well, of course, this is the latest that we are hearing. As you mentioned, the BCCI statement about a laceration in his spleen. Again, the extent of the injury we can pretty much take into consideration from the fact that they have BCCI put out update on his injury status. And yes, I mean, it is reassuring that at least we know what the issue, what the injury is and how extensive the injury is. But going by the reports, we could see that, as I mentioned, initially the prognosis was he might be out for 3 to 4 weeks, but this kind of extensive injury, we could see that stretch to extend his injury there. And from a BCCI point of view, reassuring words that he's under observation and the medical team is with him. But this looks like to be a long road of recovery for Shreyas Iyer going ahead.
Also, Vineet, the fact that the Indian team doctor is going to be staying back with Shreyas Iyer even as Team India travels back, this also is an important update that's been put out by the BCCI. The fact that the fans will be really worried about Shreyas Iyer's health, this gives them some amount of reassurance that he is going to be back on his feet soon. 3 to 4 weeks is the time that the doctors are giving.
Well, yes, it is reassuring that medical team from the BCCI would be there looking after Shreyas Iyer alongside the hospital staff and the hospital in Sydney. Reassuring for fans, of course. And as I said, 3 to 4 weeks was the timeline which which was being said earlier before the extent of the injury was known. And now with the extent of the injury being known, that recovery period would extend. And Shreyas Iyer was, remember, supposed to fly back to India because he was not part of the T20I squad. So he was supposed to fly back. With this now, it seems that Shreyas Iyer would be there in Sydney at the hospital at least for a week, is what we are hearing. It could also extend, but it puts a question mark on his recovery and his next international assignment, which is the South Africa ODIs late November. But before going into that, before taking into that in consideration, his health and well-being must be looked into, and with the BCCI medical staff being part of that, we can only hope he recovers and recovers quickly.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Vineet. Remember, the initial reports really did suggest that the kind of injury that Shreyas Iyer had sustained could have been fatal. And that's why we do see this constant presence of Team India's doctor who's going to be with Shreyas Iyer for that time that he's at the Sydney hospital recovering. That 3 to 4 weeks time of recovery now stands extended because of the extent of the injury, but some reassuring words by the BCCI, by the statement that's been released by the BCCI. It in fact talks about how he will be back on his foot soon and playing for Team India once again. With that,